In this lesson, you'll learn about creating new documents in Illustrator and things to consider during that process. So go ahead and open up Illustrator if it's not open already, and go to File, New. And you'll see we got some options here. We can go ahead and give it a name if we wanted. And then down at the bottom, there's some defaults. So it might say Print. If not, go ahead and select that. Make sure it says Print. And then you'll see that we have letter size. There's legal, tabloid, A4. There are a bunch of different preset sizes, but there's also an option to do customized sizes right here. Points is the default. You can also do picas or inches if you have a specific size that you know that you're trying to create. If you need a bleed, that would be in a print context. So if you're going to send this to a printer, ask them what kind of bleed that you need to add. If it's in a digital context, then we don't need a bleed. And you'll notice then that we selected print. Down here it has CMYK, short for cyan, magenta, yellow, key, or black. And that is the default color mode for printing. Some printers will work with RGB, but the default is CMYK. And of course we have a higher resolution because we're going to send it to print. Then we got 300 pixels per inch. Some printers are fine with 150, but 300 is preferred. We wouldn't want to do 72 pixels per inch if we're sending it to a print and we're printing it at pretty large size. And the orientation here is portrait, where the width is lower than the height. If you wanted to flip that, you could just click that for landscape orientation. It'll flip these two values. We'll cover in a different lesson creating multiple artboards. So for this example, we'll just have one. So if we go ahead and click OK, then it creates our document. If you go back to that and go to File, New, instead of Print, try out Web. What can be useful for this is if you're creating something for a web page, it automatically goes to 960 pixels width, which is pretty common. Now you might be designing for something else or a wider web page, and if so, you could customize it, but it does use pixels as the unit of measurement here, which makes sense because if you're designing for the screen, then we want to use pixels. We don't need a bleed when we're designing for the screen. And then notice down here, RGB, that's the default color mode for designing for the screen. So red, green, blue, that's correct. And then 72 pixels per inch is fine for the internet, for screen graphics. And then align new objects to pixel grid. What that means is if you have an object, it's going to align perfectly with a pixel grid, so it's not slightly off where it kind of has a blurred edge. If you go up to the top again, instead of web, try devices. It's got a couple presets here. So there's iPads, iPhone, Nexus, Galaxy, and so on. And it's going to each have its own width and height if you're creating a graphic for one of these devices. And of course, RGB, screen 72 pixels per inch for those. And there's also video and film. So depending on what you're designing for, it's going to vary for size and also pixels per inch and color mode. One other option is if you go to File, New, New from Template, there are a bunch of templates here that you can use, like banner ads, boxes, brochure. I'm not saying you need to use Illustrator instead of InDesign for a brochure, for example, but you can create some graphics in here, or even banner ads if you wanted to just do an illustration-based banner ad and you weren't going to use Photoshop to add any effects, or you were going to maybe use Photoshop later. You could export it and import it into Photoshop or open it up in Photoshop. But this is pretty neat because it's a template, and it just has a bunch of different industry standard size banner ad sizes. So explore that as well. New from Template, there's a bunch of different ones. You can also download ones online. Say you're creating a t-shirt design, you can do that as well. So depending on what product or design you're making, there are a bunch of templates in here that you can use, like a CD case, for example. So that's creating new documents and also new templates in Illustrator. I will see you in the next lesson.